right, so today I want to show you something enchanting. If you take a look, Perek Beis Pasuk Chav Gimel. Perek Beis Pasuk Chav Gimel. So it's on page 734. Now here, you always hear that every word of the Torah has significance and meaning. And the Torah goes through pages of telling us how many people there are in each tribe, how many people there are in each shevet. So here, it's talking about the tribe of Binyamin. And it says like this. It's page 734, about 11, 12 lines from the bottom. 11, 12 lines from the bottom. So it says, Umate Binyamin, the tribe of Binyamin, V'nasi livdei Binyamin, Avidan ben Gidoni. Avidan meant the son of Gidoni. He is the prince of the tribe of Binyamin. Then it says like this, Utzva'o ufkudehem. How does he translate Utzva'o ufkudehem? It's legion, a good word. It's legion and their count. Chamisha ushloshim elef, 35,000 v'arba'amos, 35,400. Now, it's a number, 35,400 in the tribe of Binyamin. What is the significance of the number 35,400? What is 35,400? I mean, it obviously there is some significance. What's the significance there? What's the significance? 35,400.
In Gematria, do the letters spell out?
No, not what they spell out. There's a significance of the number. Significance of the number. Okay, so let's analyze Shevet Binyamin, since we have a whole bunch of Binyamins in our room. Let's analyze Shevet Binyamin. What was built in the portion of Binyamin? The Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash. Now you know that in the Beis Hamikdash was what's called Makor HaBracha. That's where the bracha came down. The 12 showbreads in the Beis Hamikdash, they had the Lechem HaPanim in the Beis Hamikdash. You know what the showbreads were? Remember there's a picture of the breads. The breads are shaped like this. The breads are kind of shaped like a ches. They're shaped like this. The breads are shaped like that. Those 12 breads, which are called the Lechem HaPanim. Panim means face, because they got an opening. That's what they're called. They're called the Lechem HaPanim. Why were there 12 showbreads? Why are there 12 breads? There's no coincidence that the 12 corresponds to the 12 tribes. And the Gemara says that when Hashem wants to give bracha, so bracha has to have something to rest on. So the bracha comes down to the showbreads, so to speak, and then from there it filters out to the various tribes. Each tribe gets their bracha, as energized by the showbreads. That's one of the reasons, by the way, when you bench, you should have bread on your table when you bench. Leave bread on the table for when you bench. It's an interesting halacha. You should have bread on the table. Leave the bread there so that the bracha that comes down when we bench, we get bracha from benching. So when you bench, let the bracha come down and rest on the bread, and from there it could spread to the rest of the home. That's what it's almost like a receiver. You need a receiver for the bracha. If you haven't got a walkie-talkie on the other end, so there's nobody to talk to. So you got to have a receiver. That's the bread. Now, by the way, there is an interesting halacha. You don't bring, if you have no bread on the table, don't bring a whole loaf of bread. You don't go to the kitchen and take a whole loaf of bread and put it on the table, because there was an avodah zara that was one of the things they did, and therefore we don't do that. So if you have bread on the table, leave the bread on the table. There should always be bread on the table. When you bench, you can bring a slice of bread. Don't bring a whole loaf of bread, because there was an avodah zara called God, and one of the things they did is they would set the table they would bring out a loaf of bread. Okay, be that as it may. The Beis Hamikdash is the source of all bracha. Okay, now yeah.
What if you have a lot of people coming to sit down? What are you going to do?
If a lot of people sit down, so put out a lot of bread in the beginning. They cut up the bread. Just leave the bread. No, if there's bread on the table, you can leave it. Just don't make a point. Don't bring an extra loaf. If there's a loaf of bread, let's say there's a challah on the table that hasn't been cut up, you could still bench with that challah on the table. It's just not to do it as a preparation for the benching. Don't go and bring an entire loaf as a preparation for the benching. Okay? Now, so the Beis Hamikdash is in the tribe of Binyamin, and the Beis Hamikdash is, what do you call it? The Beis Hamikdash is the source of all bracha. Now, how many brachas a day does a Jew make? 100. We're supposed to make 100 brachas a day. Right? So you make a calculation. 3 Shemon Esreis are already at 57. 3 Shemon Esreis are already at 57, and then you have benching, and you have davening, and you have the brachas. It's not difficult on a weekday to get up to 100 brachas. The problem is some people don't make. Some people just make one bracha at the beginning of the day. Borei priha food, that takes care of it. And instead of they're constantly eating all day. If you make the individual brachas as you should, so it's not that difficult to get the 100 brachas. Okay. Now, how many days are there in the year? 354, according to the way we count by the lunar year, the lunar calendar. 354 days. If you make 100 brachas a day, 354 days a year, what number do you get? 35,400, which is the number of the tribe of Binyamin, which is where the Beis Hamikdash, which is the source of bracha, comes from. So 35,400 is no coincidence. Okay. Now,
how does that 11-day difference match up then?
The 11-day difference matches up every 3 years. That's why we lose, let's say, 30 days over 3 years, right, to the solar, and we have to stay with it because the Torah says clearly that Pesach has to come out in spring. Okay, so what happens is there are 7 leap years in the course of a 19-year cycle. So if you do the calculation, it comes out to slightly less than 1/3. That means slightly less than 1/3. You add in an extra month. You add in 30 days.
Averages out to 365 days.
It comes out every 3 years. We keep by putting in. We lose a few. We lose. Then you put in. It's like resetting the typewriter. You put in an extra month. That's why Pesach. Sometimes we talk about like this year. Pesach, I think, was an average. Came out on an average thing. There's sometimes a later Pesach, sometimes an earlier Pesach, but it's always going to be in springtime because we make an adjustment to keep up with the solar calendar because of those 11 days that we lose. So you do the average. It comes out to 7, and we lose 33 days over 3 years. Then you'd have 7 leap years in the course of 19 years. So we keep up with it. That's why the Arabs, by the way, have Ramadan. Ramadan is their month-long fast. So they count by a solar year also, and they do not make an adjustment. So Ramadan sometimes comes out in winter, and Ramadan sometimes comes out in summer. I've spoken to the Arabs. In summer, he goes, "Because in summer, you're thirsty, and you got to be fasting for 30 days during Ramadan. They have what do you call it? They fast all day, and then they have a feast. They have a feast at night, and then they fast the next day theoretically. So so that's how we make the adjustment. All right, now.
So we have 1 year where it's 387 days, and add 33 to the 354.
Yeah, we have a year where we have what's called a 13th month year. Adar Beis, we had a second month of Adar. Yeah, exactly.
Is that 100 brachas a day thing? Is that an actual
I'll get to that in a second. I'll get that in a second. You have that's why we make the adjustment. My wife's birthday is on Rosh Chodesh Adar. So what happens is a guy who's born on Rosh Chodesh Adar, you could have a very strange situation where twins are born, and the one who's born, or you have 2 boys that are born. One is born first, and it happens to be Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni that year. And the other one is born on Adar Aleph, and then if they're actually bar mitzvah, the younger one becomes bar mitzvah first. He becomes bar mitzvah 30 days ahead of him. So you could have that situation because it has to do with the calendar. My wife's birthday is on the first day of Adar. So in a leap year, I made it very clear when we got married that on Rosh Chodesh Adar, if it's a leap year and there are 2 Adars, I made it very clear to her that her birthday is the 2nd Adar. It gives me an extra month to think of a present, to forget to buy her a present, So I made it very clear right out that was a rule, in the first, you don't get 2 birthdays, you get 1 barely, and it's the second one. That's the way it works. So now the 100 bracha thing, which is what I really want to get to, the 100 bracha thing is a halacha. You have to make 100 brachas a day. I know one person who, anytime you could ask him in the course of the day, you could ask him where you're holding, he'll say to you 77. He knows how many brachas he's made. Right? It's a remarkable thing. He knows how many brachas he's made in order to get to 100. Now the Brisker Rav, I'm talking about contemporaries. The Brisker Rav, who was one of the leaders of the previous generation. So the Brisker Rav was once a guest at somebody's house for Shabbos, and he had to go daven mincha. So before he went to mincha, he said to the hostess, "When I come back from the mincha, I'd like an apple and a banana." So she said, "Okay." So Brisker Rav went to mincha, and he came back from mincha. He sat down and he didn't eat the apple or the banana. So the hostess said to him, "Why isn't the great rabbi eating the apple or the banana?" She said to her, "Well, I'll tell you why I wanted them. You see, I had kept counting. I was up to 98 brachas. So I needed to be able to make 2 more brachas. I figure I'll eat an apple and a banana. I'll be able to make my 2 brachas. But I went to mincha and I got an aliyah. So when I got the Aliyah at Mincha, I made my 2 brachas, so I don't need the apple and the banana. Which is an interesting outlook on food, isn't it? You know, you're making the bracha in order to eat. You're eating in order to make the brachas, which is a very interesting approach to life. So the idea of 100 brachas is something that is required according to halacha. Shabbos we have a little bit more of a problem because you lose those Shemon Esrei. Shabbos, instead of 57 brachas, you only have 21 because there are 7 brachas in each Shemon Esrei on Shabbos. So we have a few extra in Musaf, so 28. But you're still lacking those. You're down already 31. So that's one of the reasons why in Shabbos we eat a little bit more. You nash a little on Shabbos. You have something to eat. But halacha says whatever you do, don't cause yourself to make needless brachas. Even in your hunt to get to 100, don't start making a bracha. Don't say take a bite of apple. Don't go into a borei pri fit. Yeah. What's that? One's an Adama, one's eights. Banana is officially Adama. A banana tree is officially a plant. It's not officially.
You're supposed to just eat. Isn't there something about just supposed to eat when you're hungry, as opposed to just eating to make a bracha? That's not the reason.
Right, but if a nash, we could always put down a piece of cake. No problem. I'm not hungry when I eat cake. I'm not thirsty when I drink pop. It's just generally if it's there, then I don't want to insult the host. It's like Blue Label. You don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So, if they put it out, you indulge. Now. If you stop and think about it, what does Baruch Atah Hashem mean? What are the words Baruch Atah Hashem? We say this every day. Fundamental Judaism 101. What does Baruch Atah Hashem mean? Blessed are you, Hashem. The problem is, what do we need to? Why should we bless God? Why should we bless God? God created us. He doesn't need our blessing. The answer is.
What we're saying with the food, or because with the food, we're not. It's at this moment in time, it's not ours. Hashem created everything, so at the moment He's in possession of it. He's the owner, so we're taking ownership when we are.
That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that before you make the bracha, it belongs to God. After you make the bracha, it belongs to you. And the Gemara says if a person doesn't make a bracha, he's stealing from God. He's stealing from the Jewish people. So, but what are we doing when we say those words? So it's misunderstood. One of the misunderstanding. The problem is because of the way the Siddurim are translated, they use the pathetic translation, blessed art thou, O Lord. So imagine a guy says 100 brachas a day from the day of his bar mitzvah. Says 100 brachas a day, 700 brachas a week, 2,800 brachas a month, 35,400 brachas a year. In 10 years, 100,000 brachas. In 10 years, he's made 300,000 brachas. In 30 years, 1,000,000 brachas. So let's say a guy lives to 80. So in the course of his lifetime, he's made 2.5 million brachas. Then he comes up for his divine judgment. God says to him, did you daven? I davened. Did you learn Torah? I learned Torah. Did you make brachas? Oh, did I make brachas? How many did you make? 2.5 million brachas. That's great. What does Baruch Atah Hashem mean? You think I don't know? Blessed art thou, O Lord. And why were you blessing me? I created you. I don't need your blessing. Oh, gee, I never thought about that. I mean, you did something 2.5 million times and never thought about it. Right? So the answer is that Baruch Atah Hashem is not a blessing. We are not conferring our blessing on God. We are making a statement. Like when you say in davening, Ata Kadosh, you are holy. Is that a blessing or a statement? It's a statement that we should appreciate the fact that God is holy and He's the source of all holiness. Baruch Ata means you are inherently blessed, meaning you are the source of all blessing. You are the source of all blessing. Thank you for this fruit. You are the source of all blessing. Thank you for allowing me to relieve myself normally as a human being does. You are the source of all blessing. Thank you for opening my eyes. You understand? It becomes a completely different meaning. If you say that 100 times a day, imagine you're married and you say that to your wife 100 times a day. Just imagine, okay, we're into science fiction now, but just imagine, you say to your wife, you are the source of my joy. Thank you for folding the towels. You are the source of my joy. Thank you for keeping me company. You are the source of my joy. Thank you for not taking my credit card. You are the source of my joy. Thank you for supper. Can you imagine that? At the end of the day, your wife is just going to be like, what happened to him? But at the end of the day, you have a different relationship. At the end of the day, you have a difference. Somebody has to say that to your mother. You are the source of my joy. Thank you for changing my diapers when I was little. You are the source of my joy. Thank you for supper. You are the source. Imagine that if you'd say that to somebody, you think about it, the relationship's a different relationship, a completely different appreciation. So if you say it to God, at the end of the day, every day we should have a different relationship. Our problem is that we don't think about it. The problem is that we don't think about, Baruch Atah Hashem. We just kind of throw out whatever comes to our mouth. If you think about it, you are the source of all blessing. Thank you for giving me wisdom.
You're saying try saying that to people that you kind of want to improve your relationship with. Just start saying that to them.
I mean, you got to be careful because they'll think you're strange. As it is, being a Cleveland fan, you already have problems. But if you start saying, if you walk over to your friend, hey, you are the source of my joy. Thanks for calling me up, bro. That's the last time he's going to call you. So you got to know, you got to choose your spots. But yes, and the part of it is certainly in your closer relationships. If you would say, again, you don't have to say it in Shakespearean English. You could say, wow, you make me so happy. You can say it like that. But if you say it, okay, so part of human nature is sometimes it could get ad nauseum. Sometimes if ever you just go around, thank you, you get to get a point where the people, it's a little overdone. So you have to use your judgment. I'm just saying, as an example, in our relationship with God, since God's an intangible in our life, and you can't touch it or feel it, so we need to bring him into our life as much as possible. So make that, every time we say that, we are making God more concrete in our life.
That's thinking, because all of us probably haven't seen our moms in a while, so any extra ammo we have in order to
anything that works.
Make that time at home a little better.
Anything that works. And by the way, I don't know when Mother's Day is. It passed. You last week. You should call her up and say, Mom, Happy Mother's Day. Don't use this from. I was going to wring someone's neck once when somebody put up a sign. You don't have to call your mother on Mother's Day, because by religious Jews every day is Mother's Day. Well, that's just heartwarming. If I knew who did it, I'd take him out back of the barn and whoop him. Right? The best thing you could do to impress is to show your mother that yes, Jews do call. We call on Mother's Day because it's important to her. It's not what's important to us that counts; it's what's important to her. And therefore, you should call on Mother's Day, and you can call outside of Mother's Day too, right? But you have to appreciate your mom. Yeah, I love that. Everybody, all of a sudden they're from. You don't have to call your mother. So now go to Pasuk Gimel. Now let's go. Let's skip on. Okay, this is the, what do you call it? Very important lesson for us. After the counting, the Torah now is going to go into the descendants of Moshe and Aaron. Now, there are two important lessons here. Ve'ela told us, on page 736, Pasuk Aleph. You see where the big Gimel is on the side, right opposite the big Gimel. Ve'elu told us Moshe Aaron. Sorry, Elu told us Moshe, Aaron and Moshe. These are the offspring of Moshe and Aaron. Biyom Diber Hashem al Moshe Bar Sinai. Ve'ela shmos b'nei Aaron ha'bechor, the firstborn, Nadav v'Avihu. Nadav and Avihu, Elazar Isamar. Okay, the firstborn is Nadav and Avihu, and then he has two more sons, Elazar and Isamar. Now, why is it? What happened to Nadav and Avihu? Anybody remember? They died, right? And the Torah tells, Elu shmos b'nei Aaron hakohanim hamishuchim. These are the names of his sons who were anointed. Asher mila yadam lechahein. Vayamas Nadav v'Avihu lifnei Hashem. Nadav and Avihu died behakrivam eish zora lifnei Hashem. Bamidbar Sinai, uvanim lo hayolam. They did not have children. Ve'chayin Elazar ve'Isamar al pnei Aaron Avim. Nadav and Avihu die, and Elazar and Isamar take the positions that Nadav and Avihu should have had. Now, let's understand from that. First of all, do you see a problem in the grammatical structure of that pasuk? Pasuk Daled, do you see something wrong grammatically? It's in front of meaning in their father's lifetime. Al pnei Avim, in their father's lifetime. What is Vayamas? Now, how would you say it in proper Hebrew? Is Vayamas singular or plural? Vayamas is singular. If you wanted to say they died, you would say Vayamusu. Vayamusu Nadav v'Avihu. Why is it Vayamas Nadav v'Avihu?
Didn't they get stabbed with the same sword?
They didn't get stabbed. They went into the Holy of Holies, and a foreign fire went into their nostrils, and the fire went into their nostrils and it burnt their souls. That's what it says.
They didn't lose.
Why is it a singular?
They didn't lose life in the world to come. Maybe they only lost.
Okay, it doesn't say anywhere they lost life in the world to come. Oh, you have Vayamas, you mean they only died a physical death. Okay, not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. So commentators say like this, one of the things the Gemara says that their problem, and here it says they didn't have children. Why didn't they have children? Okay, didn't get married. Why didn't they get married? So there are two approaches to why they didn't get married. We'll see in a second. On the plain level, the Medrash, the Gemara says they didn't get married because they felt there's no one really on their level to marry. They were on such a high level. They were on an extremely high level. And there was somebody, they felt that there's nobody to marry. Now, when you're married, the two people become part of one whole, right? It's not two people. When you're married, it's two halves combining to make a whole. And they even use the expression to find the other half. Which, by the way, to find the other half, you have to find the first half first. You know, so that people say, I want to find the other half. Yeah, if you found the first half, first find the first half, then you can worry about finding the other half. You can't match a puzzle piece if you don't have the first part of the puzzle, right? So you got to find the second half. You're right, but you have to find the first half. That's very important. Like most people won't even know where the first half is before they go looking for the second half. So if you have the first half, then you can look for the second half and you create a whole. Now, Nadav and Avihu were each only a half because neither of them got married. So the two halves together make how much? One. Vayamas. They're all one. They're one. They're not two. They're one because each one of them is only a half because they didn't get married. Therefore, it says Vayamas Nadav and Avihu. Vayamas Nadav and Avihu. Now, there's a much deeper explanation here. The deeper explanation here is what did they do wrong? They brought a foreign fire. They brought an H Zara, which Hashem never asked for. So on the basic level, the commentaries say, the Torah is alluding to the idea of, which we've mentioned several times, don't innovate. Don't serve God in a way that you find novel and creative. Do it the way we're always supposed to. Don't bring a foreign fire. Sometimes people are just so bothered by the way it's been going on for 3,000 years. I want to do it some other ways. You put on a tallis that has like, instead of a regular tallis, you put on a Superman tallis or something, or guy goes rolling in the snow. Always looking for something kind of off the beaten path. There's always somebody looking for off the beaten path. Don't look for anything off the beaten path. Stay on don't bring an Eish Zora. Don't bring a foreign fire. Somebody takes up a lulav esrog, maybe your lulav, your esrog, you have a hadass and a arava, and you add a rose to the mix. Wouldn't that be good? You got all this green and yellow, and you put some red in there. Wouldn't that be good? That'd be great. No, don't. That's an Eish Zora. You just messed up the mitzvah. Mitzvah is a precise recipe. The mitzvah has to be done a certain way. We've been doing it for a couple thousand years a certain way. Don't go adding to the recipe and don't go changing the recipe. You find this with women all the time. You go to somebody's house for Shabbos. So you have some apple cinnamon cake. Your wife's wife says, wow, that was really good. I'm going to get that recipe. So she calls up her friend to get the recipe for apple cinnamon cake. Then the next day she bakes it. She calls her back. She said, Bela, I baked that apple cinnamon cake. It just didn't come out quite the way. It didn't taste the way yours did. She says, well, did you use the proper shortening? She says, I didn't have shortening in the house. I used oil instead. He goes, okay, that changes. The buddy called, all right, never mind. Did you use those, the special apples? I told you, the Jonathan apples, did you? Well, I didn't have apples in the house. I used pears. And now did you, I don't know. Did you use freshly ground cinnamon or already prepared, factory prepared? I didn't have cinnamon, so I used oregano. So you want your oregano pear cake to taste like apple cinnamon. It just doesn't say that. You got a different creature over here. Call it what you will, but it's not the same. You can call it whatever you want. It's just not the same. I knew a guy, by the way, this is completely parenthetical. I knew a guy who went to Chicago Stadium for a concert, and he bought a loose joint off one of the locals selling joints outside the stadium, but it was oregano. And the guy was allergic to oregano, so he ended up in the hospital. And I always wondered how that phone call went to his parents. Hey, Mom, Dad, yeah, I had a severe allergic reaction to some oregano. Oh, yeah, where were you? Where did you eat pizza tonight? You're not supposed to eat oregano. Well, it's a long story. I'd love to have heard that phone call. So, boy, did he mess himself up. He ended up in the hospital. So the lost money ended up in the hospital, and then they missed the concert. So now Nadav and Avihu. So the commentator is saying this. Now look at the puzzle again. Why don't they want to get married? There's one person in the Gemara that we find who never got married. Does anybody know his name? It was Ben Azai. Ben Azai never got married. Why didn't Ben Azai get married? So the Gemara says he was given a dispensation. The only person we find in the entire Talmud. Why? Because nafshi choshka batorah. My soul desires Torah. Now the plain meaning is that I'm so busy learning Torah, I don't have time for a wife and kids. I don't have time for a family. And he was given a dispensation not to get married. Again, pay attention carefully. So one level, the commentaries understand, Nadav and Avihu didn't get married for the same reason. In other words, they had incredible motivation. They had the highest level motivation. They wanted to serve Hashem with their fiery passion and channel all their passion into serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not have to take time with the mundane pursuits of family. You know what the Torah refers to that as? Eish Zara. That's a foreign fire. That's a foreign fire. You want to use your fire and channel it towards God. It's a beautiful idea. And we have a fire. What could be more than being passionate? I'm so passionate about God, I don't even want to get married. Tremendous. That's a foreign fire. That's an Eish Zara. That's a foreign fire. That's not what you were told to do. You were told to get married, have children, have a family, deal with all they have to do, even in the mundane world. And if you don't, you rechannel, but I've got another way of serving God with all that fire and all that passion. That's an Eish Zara. That's a foreign fire. No good. No good. That's the Nadav and Avihu. 1 second. Ben Azai was the one exception. It had to be ratified by all the rabbis of his generation, by the basic. It wasn't just that he chose that. He couldn't do it. I don't want to get married. My soul desires her, but there's a deeper idea here. Do you know what all the way in the book of Bereshit, take a look all the way to the back at the beginning in the big blue book. Bottom of page 18. So 3 lines from the bottom, it says, Veha Adam yoda es Chava ishto. Adam knew his wife. Right? What's that a description of?
Marital relationship.
Marital relationship. It says human cohabitation. Isn't that a strange expression to use for something which is almost entirely physical? Isn't that a strange expression? And the answer is, yeah, it is a strange expression, but the Torah uses it. And that area of life is called das. Very, very strange that area, of all areas of life, that area of life is called das? It has something to do with intelligence, with knowledge, with wisdom? What's that got to do with this? The answer is, you understand, for a man, certainly, it's the one physiological act which the man's mind has to be there. That part of his anatomy doesn't work without his mind being involved. It's a very mental thing. A man could mentally stimulate himself. He can't mentally eat. To the contrary, the more you think about food, the hungrier you get. You don't get any satisfaction thinking of it, you just get hungrier. A man can actually change himself physiologically using his mind. The mind has to be part of this. Now, what that tells you is like this. That's called das, called in some sort of form, however you want to translate it, knowledge, intelligence, whatever it is. You understand, when Ben Azai said, why didn't you get married? He said, my soul desires Torah. Do you understand? He wasn't saying, I didn't want to get married. He was saying, I couldn't get married. I couldn't get married. Because all the mind energy needed for that aspect of life by Ben Azai was already channeled into Torah. That energy is no longer available for that. It's all in Torah. That means you got to be 100% there. If you're only 99% there, then you don't have the dispensation. He was so much immersed in Torah, there was nothing left there in order for him to live as a husband. And therefore Ben Azai had a dispensation. You understand what's going on here? The further extension is that we believe, we understand, that everything that God has given us, now you understand when we say, I created the Yetzer Hara, the Gemara says, I create Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi La Torah Tavlin. I created the evil inclination, I created the Torah as the antidote. You know what that means now? The Torah is a fire, and the Yetzer Hara is a fire. You can actually substitute. That physical pleasure associated with that area of life, a person could get the same excitement and the same pleasure intellectually from Torah. All right, we're talking about Ben Azai over here. We're talking about one man in the entire Talmud. But realize that that's where that energy is channeled. And the more a person channels his energy intellectually in Torah, the less he's dominated by that area of life. I mean, some people come along and say, yeah, but I want to be dominated by that area. That's most of the world at large. But a person who's trying to get himself under control says, you know what? This is the way to control it. And therefore, Nadav and Avihu, they want to take that fire and they want to channel it, which is very admirable. There's only one problem. You know what the problem is? Hashem said, don't. Sometimes they get married, have children. That's an Eish Zara. That's a foreign fire. You know the famous story, there's a guy, a king sends, what do you call it? A king sends a messenger to another king. And he says to this messenger, I want you to go with this king, and no matter what happens, no matter what he does, do not remove your shirt. No matter what he does, do not remove your shirt. Very strange command, strange order from the king. So the messenger goes to this other king. He comes in, he sees him in the royal palace. And this other king says to him, he's talking to him, and he says, you know, you're a very fine specimen. You know, I see that the king has very fine agents. However, you only have one flaw. That's you have a scar on your chest. And the agent says to him, I don't have a scar on my chest. I've never been scarred. I don't have a scar. He said, no, I know that you do have a scar on your chest. He says, no, I don't have a scar on my chest. He says, listen, I will bet you $1 million. I will bet you $1 million that you have a scar on your chest. He says, I'm telling you I don't. He says, $1 million for your king. But there's only one way to prove it. You have to take off your shirt. The guy says, look, the king said not to take off my shirt, but surely for $1 million. That he certainly didn't understand. He certainly didn't have in mind such a simple bet. I'm going to win $1 million. So he takes off his shirt in front of the royal court. Guy, foreign king, smiles, gives him his $1 million. He comes back to his king. He says, how was the mission? He says, very good, and I succeeded beyond your wildest dreams, Excellency. He says, why? He says, I have $1 million for you. So how did you get the $1 million? He said, because that yuckle over there thought I had a scar on my chest, and he bet on it, and I ended up with $1 million for you. He says, how did you win the million? How did you prove you don't? He says, I took off my shirt, and I showed it to him. He says, you fool. I had made a wager with that king for $10 million that he cannot get one of my royal servants to remove his shirt in front of the royal court. You just cost me $9 million. Right? This is it a muscle for? It could be. It could be. It's Satan and Hashem. Okay, but that's a Satan and Hashem. But the over here is a specific. The Chavetz Chaim uses this. Is the one who brings this muscle. That means that sometimes you think you're doing something so good, and what you're doing is so terrific. But you know what the best thing is? Just follow instructions. That's the better thing. Just follow instructions. That's all Hashem wants. But I made $1 million. That's the Eish Zara. That's the foreign fire. Number one. Number two, the commentaries ask over here, why is it that the names are repeated here? These are the names of these are Moshe and Aaron, the names of the sons around the Kohanim. And it emphasizes again the names of the sons who are the anointed Kohanim. So one of the contemporary commentaries lived about 150 years ago, I think, the Iglay Tal, he says, by the Catholics, what happens when they have a new pope? What does he do? Takes on a new name. Pope takes on a new name. You know why? Why did the Pope takes on a new name? I never wonder what is he, an actor? What's he taking on a new name for? You know what's behind that? They believe there's something called papal infallibility. Pope is perfect, but not the old guy. When he takes on a new name, he becomes a new essence. He's been divinely inspired, whatever it is. The Yashka blesses him, or whatever it is, and he's got a new. And then there's something called papal infallibility. This new Pope, whatever his name is, I don't even know. Francis, is that his name now? Yeah. Pope Francis? The other guy was John Paul, Paul John, whatever. For her, second way, you become a new essence. You're perfect. You're infallible. The Torah says, you know what? We never claimed infallibility. These are the names of the Kohanim. They are human beings with their very human names. And they're not infallible. And the proof is that the first two Kohanim who were anointed died because they had a flaw. Now, this is an important lesson in the Torah throughout the Torah. There's a medrash that says there was a Roman noblewoman who confronted one of the sages. And she said to him, it was the Rav Yossi ben Chalafta or Rav Yehuda ben Chalafta, I don't remember which one. She confronted one of the sages. She said to him, come on. That biblical story about Joseph, I mean, come on, who are you trying to kid? He's a 17-year-old, away from his parents. He's in a den of iniquity called Egypt, and you're telling me that he turned down Mrs. Potiphar's advances? Come on. Who are you trying to kid over here? I mean, he was in a place worse than Florida State University. Right? And his parents weren't there, and he's 17 years old, red-blooded youth. You tell me he ran away? Come on, who are you trying to kid? So Rabbi Yosef ben Chalafta said to her, listen, take a look at the Torah. The Torah talks about Yehuda. Yehuda was under his father's jurisdiction. He's a full-fledged adult. And the Torah records openly that he had a flaw with his daughter-in-law, with Tamar. Ruvain was a full-fledged adult under his father's jurisdiction. And the Torah reports that he had a flaw. And these are people under their father's jurisdiction. They're full-fledged adults. So if Yosef, who's a teenager out in Egypt, stumbles, I mean, that's understandable, isn't it? If they could stumble, he could certainly stumble. And the Torah says he doesn't stumble. So you see, we don't whitewash. We don't whitewash anything. If it would have happened, we would have said that happened. We got nothing to hide. You see that we don't hide it. I want to take it even a step further. Almost every name, not every single, almost every name you look in the Torah reports a flaw. Open up a Quran. You won't find too many flaws there reported about Muhammad. Not too many flaws. Right? No flaws. Flaws reported about Muhammad or caricatured in cartoons are greeted with an immediate about 10-pound weight loss called head removal. Right? They're not very critical. You won't find any Yashka ever criticized in the New Testament. Not by them anyway. Right? You look at the Torah. Avram Avinu is criticized. What do you call it? He said to God, Bame'eda, how will I know that the promise will come true? Adam is certainly criticized. Noach is criticized. He got drunk after the Mabul. Yaakov is criticized for getting angry at Rachel. Moshe Rabbeinu is criticized for getting angry and hitting the rock. Aaron is criticized for the golden calf. Miriam is criticized for Lashon Hara. Everybody we have over here, everybody seems to have. What happened to these people? The answer is they're people. And we never pretended they're not people. They are people.
Jewish mothers.
What's that?
Explain Jewish mothers.
What's that?
They're critical.
There you go. They're just following the rich tradition. All right. The answer is that these are we want to emphasize. Obviously, they're at a higher level. We can't comprehend the flaws. Are at a very subtle level. The flaws. But if the Torah comes along and then says, well, the whole incident with David HaMelech and Bathsheba, it isn't what it looks like. If it was what it looked like, we'd be the first to say it. We don't hide anything. It's an important rule in Judaism. People criticize us. People say, well, how could an Orthodox Jew, if there's some rabbi embezzles or something? See, you guys all. We never said that. We never said that. We never said that we're above it. We never said we're immune to it. But let's look at the society as a whole. On a whole, our society compared to other societies, there's a lot less embezzling and a lot less violence and a lot less adultery and a lot less everything else. Are there individuals? Of course there are. The Torah says don't. That means you could. The Torah says don't. That means the Torah says don't steal. That means people could steal. And therefore, over here, the Torah mentions their names. We're not infallible. We never claimed infallibility. There's a whole tractate of Shas that talks about what happens when the Sanhedrin makes a mistake. The Sanhedrin made a mistake. There's a whole tractate called Maseches Horius. They bring a korban. They made a mistake. Who said that? That idea that religious Jews, people say, how can a religious Jew? The Torah is perfect. The people are far from perfect. People are far from. It's the Torah that makes us perfect, or that at least helps us to strive towards improvement and perfection. But we are far from infallible. We never said we're infallible. That's the idea. Okay.